Okay, everyone, we have decided to sit down and go live. I know that there's been quite a few questions from a lot of people who have been wondering what has been going on with the Justice for Dro case. We've decided to do an update in this manner to make sure we're very deliberate and responsible about how we share the updates in the actual information. And we're actually going to talk through why we've decided to start to navigate the case in this particular manner. I'm sitting here with Natalie Davis, which is Dro's cousin, who I now get to call friend. And we had the opportunity to really navigate and learn a lot. Probably since the last time that we've sat on and had a discussion about the case actually together. Today we are giving you an update. Myself and the family met with the chief of police, the assistant chief of police, two of the captains from the police department, one of the lieutenants from the police department, the city manager, the
Human
communication, the comms
relations.
person or the spokesperson for GPD, the communication person for the city of Gainesville, and then two community engagement persons from the city of Gainesville. So it was a party on yesterday at GPD, I must state. And the reason that we called this particular meeting was for multiple reasons. One reason is that in response to the first bogus DCF complaint that was lodged against me related to my baby being in the protest. And let me be clear, my baby is one now. He'd have been to protest. He go to rallies. Listen, if there ever is going to be a person that's going to be an organizer, it's going to be him. He won't even nap because he needs to understand what's going on and be a part of power to the people. But in response to that, there were some officers from GPD that went and actually had a meeting with leadership at DCF, trying to get them to be able to lodge actual charges to validate something that actually just was not valid. And I wanted to make sure to sit in their faces when I let them know that I've also reached out to council and things that we will be doing proceeding forward. Additionally, we sat down with them because we did public records requests way back at the beginning of the year. It's been more than 6 months. There's quite a bit of stuff. Y'all, my lighting is crazy. That we have been waiting on that we still do not have. And that includes the full amount of the actual text messages, call logs, the actual 4 hour interview, body cam footage. So we're still missing a significant amount of stuff. And so we wanted to make sure that we did it in a very deliberate manner. So Natalie, Tyrone's dad, Natalie's mom, and two of the aunts, they travel again to Florida. And so this is not people just willy nilly or saying we're going to get on a virtual call, making that trek up from Broward County in order to be able to sit across the table from the people and actually get some true understanding. One of the things that was actually also impressive is going through all of our email communications. There are a lot of them, creating documentation, citing policies that were requested and actually pulled as we actually talked about and navigated some of the failures actually in the investigation. I'm actually going to pull that up. I do want to share some of the particular points from there as we get started. I want to name, and I'm going to turn it over to Natalie to even drive it home more. One of the reasons that these updates have become far and frequent and in between is because of the level of noise in the actual chaos. And so the chaos that was created by so many people external to this overshadowed the work that actually was being done in a very, very significant way. And so it did not detour the family, it did not detour ourselves, but it was very imperative for us to actually pull back. I want to name that things are still happening, like DCF is still being called all willy nilly. We've just not taken the time to give it any energy because with the continual pattern of behavior and consistency, it'll start to actually speak for itself. And a lot of times people think that they are making, what is it called? Anonymous calls and different things like that. We're in a day and age that everything is trackable and actually leaves a footprint. And so they've gone as far as to call DCF for me and then give a phone number that's not mine, as if the people are not going to know that they've been called so much, and as if my information is not forward facing. They have called DCF on other people and tried to make it seem like the family has done that. Like, still, we've just decided not to give it energy, to fully stay focused on justice for Dro and for Tyrone, for his family, and for his children. And I'm glad to say that we have stayed that course. Because we'll be able to share a lot of the outcomes and things that happened yesterday. So, Natalie, I would love to give you an opportunity to actually just kind of talk about one, and from your own perspective, why the updates have been very infrequent, kind of what your family has expressed, just emotions and different things like that before we actually get into our meeting with GPD and the city manager on yesterday.
Yes, not a problem. I actually want to start by apologizing for my voice. It is horrible, as this has been an eventful last week or so, to say the least. But I will say, as a family, navigating this process has not been easy. It has been a learning process for us as a family. It has been so eye opening to not only the systems that are supposed to work for us, but oftentimes work against us, but it's also eye opening to us just as far as um, how we have to change our approach when navigating certain situations or even certain individuals. And so we originally bought this case forward facing from the beginning because we wanted to make sure that everyone had a clear understanding of what we knew, as well as some of the questions that we had. There was a lot that we did not know from the beginning, but it didn't make sense. And a lot of times we have that intuition that comes up in us that tells us something is not right, but because we don't have the evidence or the information to support it, oftentimes we kind of take a step back and we just accept it for whatever we're given. And what this case has shown me, as well as my family, is that it's not sufficient for us to do that. It is not okay for us to know that something is wrong and choose to accept what we're given, knowing that things are wrong. Because if Tyrone Davis Jr. has been handled this way, how many other individuals have been handled the same way and no one knows because no one was willing to put forth the effort to find out? And so um, this has shown us the importance of utilizing our voice. This has shown us the importance of doing the work because it's work. It's not easy. There are days where we don't sleep. There are times where we have to lean on our family in ways that I don't think I ever anticipated leaning on these individuals. We've always been close, but this has brought us closer in ways that we couldn't have even imagined because the importance of what we're doing is everything, and it's draining sometimes. And what we realized is even as we navigate this process and we learn the do's and the don'ts, I don't regret bringing in the world. I don't regret bringing this to social media because it raised awareness and it raised knowledge and it allowed a lot of individuals to understand the importance of this case and to know who Tyrone Davis Jr. was. With that being said, what I do know now is to be mindful of how you navigate certain systems. So, growing up, I was always taught it's not what you do, it's how you do it. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons from this. It wasn't what we did, it was how we did it. It was being mindful of the individuals who we allow in, mindful of our delivery, mindful of the information that we share, and making sure that the bigger picture and the bigger goal is always the center of our conversations and the center of everything we're doing, staying focused, not allowing anything to distract us. Rather, that's our own personal feelings or individuals that are around. So I think learning those lessons have been very important. But I want to make it very clear we are not done. And I've said that over the last few months. And I will continue to say that, and I will continue to stand by that. We are not done. We are not finished. We are not letting go. I've made that very clear to Gainesville Police Department in meetings. I've made that very clear to every individual who is a part of our team helping us, whether that's the research team, the private investigator, and every other party that's helping us. I've made it very clear we are not going anywhere. So for everyone who's thinking, oh, we're not saying much anymore, understand it's more about strategy at this point, but the work is definitely being done. And we are, when we're having conversations about how do we advance this discussion, how do we move to the next step in this process, I want to make it very clear we're offered the ability to do Zoom meetings at most of these meetings. We're offered the ability to sit on a social media or a video platform and have these conversations, but the impact is not the same. the level of understanding that is able to be reached when you are face to face with the individuals who are able to make the decisions that need to be made and to review the evidence that needs to be reviewed and to go over the deficiencies that need to be addressed, because this is systematic problems that led to Tyrone Davis Jr. being treated the way he was treated and handled the way he was handled on Archer Road. Those things need to be addressed in person. Those things need to be addressed where I can speak to you both with my emotions on my sleeve, but with my knowledge forward facing to make sure you understand that I'm not just an emotional person, that I am an educated individual who is well versed in the things that I'm speaking of, and that my requests for you are not outside of the normal. They are what should be normal for any individual. And I think my mom said it best at the meeting yesterday. It didn't matter if he was a judge or a janitor. He should have been treated like a person. His case should have been handled appropriately, and it was not. And that's why we're here, and that's why we're not going anywhere.
Thank you so much for definitely centering that. And you said so many things that were absolutely relevant. And like I stated, I want to let people know that I named a lot of people that were actually in the meeting. So when I requested the meeting, I requested the meeting for myself and the family and the chief of police and the city manager, because in this city, the person that the police department actually answers to is the city manager. And then the city manager is who actually goes to the city commission. And makes recommendations, but the city manager is driving. And so I want to name that because that was one of the things that I stated early on when people were saying, well, oh, they went to the commission meeting, you should do that. That's not actually a lever. It's great to go to the commission, but actually to get things done, or the manner in which as it relates to process, this is the actual process. We finally pulled this lever because of the back and forth with the public records. And so, as you all know, we pulled public records in the beginning. I started to show how deliberate the public records actually were, very explicit. One of the things that we learned yesterday is our records requests were so explicit that there were things that we reviewed that the people who investigated the case did not review. So when we reference things from the CAD calls, which are the calls that go into the 911 communication center, they were looking like deer in actual headlights. And so before I get into that, I want to name a document that the family actually created that was presented to the city manager, the chief of police, the assistant chief of police, communications. And one thing that was so funny when we first sat down is they were giving us this disclaimer, and they were told that it was going to be a live video and we can't have them on live. And there's a special way in order to do that, and to set it up with the shit was funny as hell. So lets me know, as I've always known, that they're paying attention to when I say something or something's going to happen. And but then second of all, even to make that like disclaimer, you all understand that people are paying attention, and that's the level how I feel about it. So they understand in that moment that it was very clear that people are not going anywhere, and despite all the noise, the people that a lot of this are is addressed out understands that we are serious and going to be relentless until we get all the way to the end. So I wanted to like name that particular part. And so in the letter, that the family did, they basically stated that they've conducted a thorough review of the investigative file. I think Natalie was the primary catalyst of this that was done, so I want to state that on behalf of the family. Related materials, so I have conducted a thorough review of the investigative file and related materials provided to date. I've identified numerous investigative deficiencies that raise substantial concerns regarding the completeness, thoroughness, and integrity of investigation. These concerns are based on documented information contained within investigative records and supporting evidence. The following investigative failures have been identified or supported by reference documents. Investigative failure number 1. The initial responding officers failed to secure the scene, contact traffic homicide investigators, and complete a traffic crash report in accordance with GPD policies and applicable Florida statutes. Despite concerns raised by officials at UF Health Neurosurgery Center regarding Mr. Davis's injuries, his condition upon arrival, and the inconsistency between his injuries and the reported explanation of how the incident occurred, these concerns were not adequately addressed. The 911 call reported that a male had been struck by an unknown vehicle which was no longer at the scene and was suffering from unknown injuries, but was unconscious, unresponsive, but still breathing. Given the nature of the call, the circumstances warranted an immediate and comprehensive hit and run investigation and the involvement of the appropriate investigative units. And she's absolutely correct. These were things that we knew, these were things that we stated, these were things that act like were not so. But when we actually pulled and referenced GPD's internal policies, exactly what Natalie stated is here. And she states, supporting documentation page, the Gainesville Police Department General Order 42.1 and 40.4, the CAT incident report detail incident, and then she gives that information and actually references specifically where she got this actual documentation. Investigative failure number 2. The initial responding officers failed to collect and preserve evidence in accordance with GPD policy, applicable Florida statutes. Potentially critical evidence was never collected or was collected several months after the investigation was initiated or after it was closed, to include a roll of paper towels that his head rests on at the scene, pizza and chicken wing boxes that were purchased by him immediately prior to the incident, the Wi-Fi router that was allegedly taken to be replaced immediately prior to the incident but remained broken days later, toxicology report of the driver of the vehicle he exited at the time of injury, phone records from his 3 cellular devices that could contain communication regarding what was occurring at the time of the incident, the original and complete video footage from the location immediately before the incident location, which shows driving patterns and potentially the final moments of life of Mr. Davis, firearms owned and possibly in possession at the time of the incident. And I want to make sure that we're going to read these because we're going to actually break down where we landed, like where we are, things that was initially said. So even reading this is just, yeah, yeah. The detective documented at the scene Tyrone's phone and wallet were provided to Kiara Davis, despite the need for an ongoing investigation. A request for Mr. Davis's phone that he had at the time of the incident was subsequently made, and despite being provided with the wrong device by the last person to communicate with him prior to his injury, it was never documented that the correct device or any additional devices that belonging to Tyrone Davis Jr. were ever collected or reviewed, despite being notified of him owning 3 cell phones, and the potential significance of all devices. Despite the CAD records clearly documenting a firearm being located on his person at the time of his arrival at the hospital, it was not collected even at the time of case closure. The supplemental report documents the initial video footage of the U-turn, and what could be the door of the vehicle opening was overwritten and unavailable by the time detectives attempted to retrieve it approximately 4 days after the incident, potentially destroying significant information in this investigation. Given the nature of the incident, the circumstances warranted an immediate investigation, including the preservation of evidence and the involvement of appropriate investigative units. And then she actually references the supporting documentation, page number, and all the way down to the section. And then investigative failure number 3, delay in contacting the first individuals on the scene who had possession of critical time-sensitive information from when Mr. Davis was located, to include who was with him, how long it took someone else to arrive, and the demeanor and or concerns shown in statements made by the first person on the scene who knew the injured party. Despite the police report stating that Mitchell Zimmerman was interviewed by patrol at the scene, he advised that he was only asked for his contact information at the scene, which he provided, and further advised that the behavior of Kiara Davis was very suspicious at the scene, and he wanted to provide law enforcement with additional information, but was not contacted. After finding my family on social media, we provided him with a telephone number, and he initiated the contact with GPD detective on 1/6/26, which was more than a week later, which is 10 days after the incident, because he had not been contacted. Investigative failure number 4, the Gainesville Police Department failed to maintain the knowledge of the status of the victim in the case and failed to collect the vehicle black box after alluding to a plan to collect it during a conversation with the medical examiner's office. According to documented communication between the ME and GPD via email communications on 12/30/2025, Detective Blizzard advised that Tyrone Davis Jr. was still on life support, despite him officially being pronounced deceased on 12/29/2025. In the same email communication, on 1/2/2026, Detective Blizzard advised the ME's office that they intended on downloading records from her phone in hopes of answering questions of speed, acceleration, braking, door opening, etc., to assist in showing that this is likely an accidental death. This statement alludes to the functions of the black box, which was never pulled, but it also shows a clear example of preconceived bias regarding the outcome of the case, as this should have been done in an effort to determine what happened in the Tyrone Davis Jr. case, not prove or disprove any specific outcome related on the ongoing investigation. And then she gives the supporting documentation in the page in the communications. Additional investigative findings. There's been a 4-month delay in fulfilling the request for all relevant records. Phone records provided are incomplete and don't include all records discussed during an in-person meeting with GPD and or in the incident report completed by detectives, despite documentation that the phone records were all retrieved. Based on the new case updates, including the location and retrieval of the firearm, I am sure a supplemental report should have been completed that has not been provided. Based on the officer's account of what occurred, based on Kiara's statement, they do not believe that intent was present. However, according to Florida statute regarding the elements of crimes, some additional charges that do not require intent. And then she names those, and I'll tell those later because we're actually going to get into the conversation about those. In addition to the investigative concerns outlined above, I remain deeply concerned regarding Gainesville Police Department's failure to fully comply with my public records request. A public records request was initially submitted February of the 25th, 2026, seeking records associated with this investigation. Since that time, I've made repeated good faith efforts to obtain the requested materials through numerous follow-up communications, follow-up requests, and then she named them. March 16th, March 23rd, March 27th, March 31st, April 29th, March 12th, June 3rd, June 18th, and also July 1st. Despite these repeated follow-up requests, the record request remains incomplete. And then she talks about the payment that was actually made. And mind you, I'm the person who made that payment. And so I made the payment and made it clear to everyone in the meeting that the family or I or no one else should have actually had to pay for anything as it relates to the family in this case because of an inadequate investigation. And as I stated, there's multiple commissioners that I could have gone through who could have got this stuff for free. But I wanted to be very clear that no matter what the barrier was that they put before me or this family, that we were actually going to proceed forward. And so I wanted to make sure there's other things that was written, but it's like the seriousness of it, follow up, and those things. So I'm not going to read all of those because we're actually going to talk about what happened and also what is different between yesterday's meeting and then the previous meeting that we actually had. And so the first thing that I want to make sure that we name that is different is that we didn't have all of the evidence that we had during the first meeting that we actually have now. And so I wanted to ensure that we name like that particular thing. Other things is not only did we get the evidence from them, but we got evidence from multiple agencies. So we did request to the Florida Department of Transportation. We did request to Alachua County Fire Rescue. We did request to the Combined Communication Center. We did request to the Medical Examiner's Office. We did request to UF Health Shands. And so to see even a lot of the gaps in the information that GPD actually didn't even take the time to gather, that we were actually able to gather to help create a full picture of the things that happened and actually transpired. Also, this time we were armed with information from from many people, but from the private investigator who literally is respected by GPD, who is a 22-year veteran, who is very well known, who was deliberate about even reaching out to the actual detective actually on the case, making sure to do his actual due diligence. And so I want to just, pass it back to you, Natalie, to start wherever it is that like you would actually like to start.
Yes. So I definitely agree that the atmosphere in the meeting was completely different this time versus the first time. Um, we had requested the documentation as far as the evidence even prior to the first meeting. Let's make that clear. But even then, it was delayed. But at that point, we had nothing. So we went into the first meeting with all of our different thought processes, with the inconsistent stories that we had been given as a family, but no actual supporting documentation from any officials. And we had a conversation and we had GPD sit across from us. and give us these inaccurate and incomplete statements as to what this case looked like and what their investigation looked like. And at that point, there was no way for us to dispute these things because we had no evidence to the contrary, other than what we thought and what we felt. The difference is when we went into this meeting, not only were we armed with our knowledge, which we had from the beginning, but we were also at this point armed with the supporting documentation to show them this is where you failed. This is where you all as an agency dropped the ball. This is what you forgot to do. This is what you didn't do. This is what wasn't important to you. This is what you chose to pick and choose what was relevant and when it was relevant. This is how your officers utilize confirmation bias. And if you don't know what that is, please look it up. It's literally when you want something to have happened a certain way. And so you only look for things that support that outcome. And so the officers in this investigation, unfortunately, had a confirmation bias from the beginning that they wanted the outcome of this case to be accidental. And that was very clear based on the email that Ms. Shanae just read that was actually written by a GPD detective that literally stated that they were pulling this evidence to prove that his death was an accident. Not to prove what happened, but to prove that it was an accident. So it was very clear that there was confirmation bias, and that confirmation bias dictated a lot of their investigative tactics, which led to investigative failures, which led to missed evidence, overlooked policies and procedures. And now we're asking for accountability, not just for the individual who was directly involved with this situation, but also for the individuals who are directly involved in the reason the outcome of this case was what it was when it could have been something different had they actually just done the work. We've never asked for fabricated evidence. We've never asked for a made up storyline. We've never asked them to create a facade about what happened. We've only asked for the truth. We've only asked for a complete investigation. We've only asked for all of the research that should have been done to have been done so that we can go and say either they did everything they could and this was the outcome, or they did everything they could and they can't reach an outcome. But whatever it is, let the record reflect that you did everything you could. And that's where we're missing. That's what's not there. GPD has failed Tyrone Davis Jr., GPD has failed my family, GPD has failed their community because the community of Gainesville should be able to feel safe that if something happened to them or their loved ones in that city, that that police department is going to conduct a thorough investigation. And what this showed us is that if there is a preconceived bias or a confirmation bias from the beginning, that your case will not be handled appropriately and that you may want to do your own independent investigation because it's possible that things will be missed. It's possible that important, vital information may not be preserved by the police department because if you're telling me that you have a video of the vehicle making a U-turn in the moment before he was outside of that vehicle on the concrete on Archer Road, and this video may or may not show the door opening, they're not sure, which is what they told us. And the video that they have is a cell phone recording of the official video that was never collected. And when they finally did decide to go collect it, it was overwritten. Investigative failures like that could make or break an investigation. And so I think it's important to make it clear, as I did with Gainesville Police Department, not only are you not dealing with individuals who lack knowledge and common sense, but you're not dealing with individuals who lack actual education into the work that we're expecting you all to do. So we are very educated individuals with college degrees and work history to support our requests and to give us a better understanding about what you should have done in this investigation. So when we're saying investigative failures and agency deficiencies and violations of policy and procedure, we're not saying these things because they sound good. We are saying these things because I'm able to go and give you your policy number, and the paragraph within your policy and tell you where your policy says your officer should have done this, but your police report said that they chose to do this. So it wasn't my feelings that told me you failed my family. It was your policy that told me you failed my family. It was your police report that showed me your failures. It was your lack of follow through, your documented inconsistencies to a statement that you refer to as consistent. It's your missing pieces as well as what's there that makes it very clear to me that you have failed in the work that you should have done, your standard operating procedures. And so when we go to the table and we're having these conversations and they're like, oh, well, I don't think that's normally how it works. Okay, no problem. Well, let me tell you the policy that it says it in, and then I'll send it to you if you need it because I have a copy right here. So I can definitely provide that to you at any point during this conversation. So I want to make it very clear that when we go to these tables, and I'm speaking of individuals who feel as if they are wrong or who have knowledge of things not necessarily being right, when you go to these tables and you're sitting with these individuals that you want to hold accountable for their failures, don't go and speak off just emotions or feelings. Yes, emotions matter because at the end of the day, our fight wouldn't be our fight in this particular situation had the emotional connection not been there. But don't allow the emotions to drive the conversation. So are we emotional about the death of Tyrone Davis Jr.? Absolutely. Absolutely. And the emotions are going to be there. But the emotions never drive our conversation or our requests. Because when we go into this meeting, yes, we are emotional, but we are emotional and we are fact driven. And so when we're having these conversations and I'm telling you that you failed and you're trying to come up with a response because you're thinking, how do I address what she's saying? You can't just address it without being specific because when I come back to you, I'm going to be specific. I'm going to give you the policy and the documentation, and I'm going to tell you exactly where you can go into your documentation and find that exact policy and why you messed up. And I walk through with several copies of this 4-page document pointing out their deficiencies. And now tell me where I'm wrong.
And I want to drive that point home because even as I became forward facing, that was one of the things that I wanted to drive home to so many people. Number one, this is not an overnight thing. It is long, it is tedious, but it's all in the actual details. And so things that actually came up that were interesting is even when we talked about that the medical examiner had questions, the medical examiner didn't land on that. And they specifically were asking for video, asking for, did they talk to the doctors, asking, did they have witnesses? And so they was like, oh, no. And it's almost as if they were trying to allude, like, no, they got him wrong. No, this is what we saw in the email communications. Right. Because of the way that I structured the follow up records requests with the ME. And it's so sad that I can't fully, state how that was done just because of like the level of chaos. So helping to help people with a one-off. I mean, it did help. So I do know that there were 2 people that reached out that had been trying to get the files for their family members. I actually helped them to navigate it. And for one of them, their mom's boyfriend, who was the murderer, was actually arrested. So I want to name that in this process, there are people who are being helped. Even in the mix of all the things that are actually happening. And then the other part about it is even as they were trying to act like, and so many people, because we move off of emotion, was like, oh no, that's not how it is, that's how it works. The question was, let's go look at policy. And so one thing too, GPD kept saying that it is the medical examiner who makes both determinations of whether the cause of death and the actual manner of death. Well, the medical examiner determines the cause, which was multiple blunt force trauma to the head, but the manner of death by the medical examiner's policy is done by law enforcement, and it's just the medical examiner that denotes it on their documentation. So even as law enforcement yesterday was saying, well, the way we've always done it, just because you've always done it that way doesn't mean that it's actually right. So there's actual clarity because we actually pulled the policy. So as people kept pointing fingers from each agency back and forth, we were actually able to close that gap. Another part that stood out a lot is when we were talking about when they were saying that Kiara's story was consistent. On the CAD reports, within 2 minutes of the reports, the story changed in 2 minutes. And so when we were like, oh, we looked on the CAD report, you actually saw people looking at each other across the room like, wait, what? For themselves. Additionally, when it was that the way that it was actually the case was closed out with no follow up, they were able to state that it was this Officer Wilson, and everybody in the room like paused. And so,
Everybody
like
was
now, that lets us
whispering.
know: should we go back and pull his file? Should we do these
Right.
particular things? So, by being so strategic and so deliberate, there was a lot of clarity that was actually in what was said and also what wasn't said. And then a lot of the stuff that they tried to leave hanging, we were able to like close that gap in. And so that part was super helpful. So there's another part that I wanted to state that you all brought up, which was about the evidence actually on the scene. Because one of the ways that they opened up is that they named the thousands of records requests that they get, and they stated that they moved the request up because I was a person that made the request. But we know that not to be the case, because we know although the requests that the family did from the things I asked them to do were first, people were, as soon as they were releasing it to us, they were releasing it to other people. One thing that happened is there were some pictures of Dro on the side of the road, unconscious, that was released by an influencer or another person that actually does this. And they was like they were looking around. They said they couldn't figure out who the
We
person
don't
was
have
because
we didn't release the photos. You
right,
absolutely did.
right. And so what was interesting is that they didn't release, they didn't come from the family. So how is it that this person got them? And so first they were like, well, they didn't know how to go look at the public records request. We was like, well, just go look at any request after hours and to be able to see. But then also the family was very deliberate to be able to go back and show that the influencer actually posted the email
Absolutely.
communication. What we also learned is the two people that actually are the supervisors in records both quit, and so their last day was the same day, which was June 30th. And so then one person that is in the mix of all of this is now being promoted to supervisor. So it's been really interesting, and it's going to be interesting to see what comes from all of that, like as we proceed forward. So I definitely wanted to name that particular thing that actually happened and took place for everybody that actually is tuning in. But then I wanted you to name what was the reason that they stated that the person could actually have those pictures. And I think it was relevant because it was really moving in the room with everybody who was there when you all expressed why it was an issue.
Yes. So I wanted I think I've made that clear before, but I will definitely state it again time and time again. Um those particular photos, I was in possession of those photos within 10 days of the actual incident. As we stated earlier when reading the documentation that we gave to GPD, the first individual on the scene is the person who took those photos. He made it very clear when speaking to me that he had no problem providing me with those photos. He would provide them to GPD and then he would delete them because he wanted to make sure that there was no risk of those photos being released because he understood the sensitive nature of those photos. Me being someone who has represented my family and who has spoke on behalf of my family on multiple occasions, made the conscious decision to protect my family from those photos, knowing
Hold
what
on,
they did
Natalie,
to me,
for one
seeing it.
moment. I want to make an announcement for the people that are tuning in. For the people that are here trying to detract from what actually is happening, don't engage. So I want to name that even as those people are doing that, they're blowing up my phone. There's private phone calls, numbers from 954. They want the focus to be on other people, and we're not doing that. So
Exactly.
for people, we appreciate you all actually in the comments. Please don't respond or engage. Stay focused on the issue at hand. The things that we'll be able to share as we continue forward, we were able to get these things done by staying focused on the issue at hand. We already know where the mess is and where the chaos is. We already know that the Davis family has been very consistent, very upfront and transparent about their position, and that's actually where we are in this particular moment. So I definitely want to name that, and that is also one of the reasons we took the time to structure this conversation in this particular way. So even if people can't get all of the information at one time, they can go back and watch this in tidbits and find out for those who really are interested in actually what's happening. So sorry about that, Natalie. Go right ahead.
No problem, not at all. But yes, I've been very clear that me not sharing those photos within our family was a protection. Um, Personally, seeing those photos did a lot to me. Waking up out my sleep, seeing him. And so my thought process was protect my family. Um, I have been, I was a, I was there to watch my grandfather go through his last days of life, and I know what that looks like and how that sticks with the person. And I always want to make sure that you keep the best memories of people. And so I wanted my family to be able to remember him and all of the happy moments that they've had and not laying in the middle of the road in that condition. And that's why I chose to not share those photos with the family in the beginning. And just so that we're clear, I don't have a problem with the fact that they were released because I understand the way public records requests work. I understand that if it's a part of public records, that it is subject to a public records release. My concern was two things. One, that records that sensitive in nature were released with no prior notification to the family that, hey, this is something that someone in the public now has and will possibly share. And then two, the fact that we did our public record request in February. You didn't include them in my public record request completion or partial completion. Had that been a part of my public record request, which I knew was done in the beginning before anyone's, then I would have known to prepare my family for those things to come in future requests. But the fact that it was intentionally, and I will stand by the fact that I feel like it was intentional, left out of my request, but then released to social media influencers under the pretense that this is not a dead body, it's an injured party, and it's not a crime scene, it's photos of an accident, is diabolical because anyone who knows a little bit, because it don't take a lot, anybody who knows a little bit about brain activity and brain death, when the first responders arrived on the scene and conducted the test to determine what his level of brain activity was, he was a step away from brain death. So if you want to use the technicality that he had not been legally declared dead, that does not take away from the state of him being unconscious, unresponsive, and unable to control normal bodily functions, which is, in essence, all of the key components of brain death. And so don't utilize a technicality to justify doing something that otherwise would have been considered wrong and cover it up with, oh, it was a public records request when you didn't include it in the public record request at first, but then chose to include it when it was beneficial for the chaos. So I don't have a problem with anyone having the photos as part of their public record request. I don't have a problem with them filling the public record request. I have a problem with Gainesville PD feeding confusion and utilizing parts of this case and information related to this case to feed the chaos to stop the investigation on our end. And I want to make it very clear, as I have with Gainesville Police Department, I don't care how much chaos exists in this situation. I don't care how many people sit around and spread whatever false narratives that they choose to spread. I don't care if y'all chose to set the building on fire. I'm going to be in the building demanding justice for Tyrone Davis Jr. in the building as it burns down because I ain't going nowhere. So I want to make that very clear. Chaos stops nothing.
Absolutely. Um, Thank you for that. So other things that you also, which we already stated, that we know the scene wasn't secure, which was a violation of their own policy. And the way you knew that is because the paper towels were still there. You bought up the pizza box, the chicken wing box, all of those things were actually still there as well. One thing that you all pointed out yesterday that I actually missed was this conversation regarding the Wi-Fi router. So with the Wi-Fi router, one of the big points of is that Kiara left Tyrone, went to the cell phone store, whether it is T-Mobile, AT&T, they're next to each other, so that part is fine, to have this Wi-Fi router fixed. But then also in the investigation, when they actually interviewed her and looked at the Wi-Fi router, it wasn't fixed. So she went to have it fixed or replaced and was gone for hours. And the Wi-Fi router actually wasn't replaced or fixed. It's one of those things. And we don't know if anything malicious happened, but it was a very valid point that people in the room that was well received is number one, what happened in that time lapse, and then also too, did you go and get like video footage from the time frame before? And
Where
that's
she
one of the
was,
things
what she
that
was
footage,
actually doing. Yeah.
yeah. So it's like yes, you pulled the infotainment center, and you said that she went there, which was also strange because there was no other um, mapping for anything else except for that particular store, and you're in a very unfamiliar place.
Right.
So I thought, and that's the deal. In an investigation, any one thing by itself might not be a big deal, but I think you all did a good job of driving home. It's all of these things that are compounded together that weren't investigated. Other things that you brought up is how in their own investigation they documented that they asked her to provide the phones that he had, but she did not provide the phone that he had at the time that these things actually took place. And no one followed up and stated, why did you not provide the phone? I want to name for the people that are tuned in. Another reason that this is such a big deal is with the text messages. There's been a back and forth where the people that were handling records, who are now no longer there, stated that the attorney for GPD stated that the text messages in their totality don't have to be turned over because it's not a part of the investigation. And so my position is that you provided text messages from 3 days before. So therefore, anything from that first text message that you provided to at least to December 31st, after he went to the coroner's office, should be included. And then I know Natalie will give additional context because her position is that, and there's other things that you referenced that means you looked at as a part of the investigation that should be included as well. And so I'll actually give it to you in order to be able to include those things.
Correct. So in our original meeting with GPD, I believe it was March 13th, we sat across the table from two individuals who work for the agency, and they specifically told us how in text message communication, Tyrone um, agreed to pay for the Wi-Fi router and things like that. These things were also alluded to in the police report, which is fine. They talked about in the police report phone calls where she called him as she was coming up to the hotel and he called her back and the call was only this amount of minutes and all of these different things. Great. Unfortunately, we can't take your word for it anymore. You've shown us that your word is not sufficient. So now we need the evidence to support it. So as a part of our public record request, of course, we're asking for all of these phone records. And then you give me bits and pieces of phone records. And even as I look through these phone records, I'm specifically looking for these conversations that you advised me occurred and they're not there. And so you can't have heads on both sides of the token. You have to pick and choose. You can't deem it relevant enough to address in a conversation with the family, relevant enough to document in your police report, but not relevant to the case when you're providing me public records requests saying that you provided me with everything that you reviewed as part of the investigation. So if you did not review these things as part of the investigation, how did you document them in your police report? How were you able to verbally have conversation with me about them had you not reviewed them? So you have, and you're just picking and choosing what you're giving me. And so for that reason, again, like Shanae said, I very much mirror her sentiment that in a death investigation, everything is relevant. Because one thing on its own may not mean a lot, but if you put it all together, if anyone has seen the Netflix documentary about the young lady who has been convicted in the car accident situation with her and I believe it was two or three other people in the car with her that lost their lives.
I
One
think it's
of
called,
those
the name of
things,
it is called Crash. Is that the name of
I
it?
believe it was the crash, yes.
Okay.
So one of these things, it is not enough to say anything happened. But if you put it all together, it's a whole lot of reason to suspect a whole lot of things possibly happened. We're not asking you to make up stuff. We're asking you to look at everything that's there to do your job, Tax dollars pay y'all, and I pay taxes. Have
Very
paid
much
taxes
so.
all my life. So as long as our income is utilized to help fund these police departments, we expect them to work for us like they work for anybody else. And when your legal advisor, I think that's the word the legal advisor, when your legal advisor is giving you legal advice, I advise them to review the documentation that you submitted first. Because your
Absolutely.
legal advice should not have advised them to redact part of phone records that were mentioned and discussed within their police report. Because that's clear that it was used as part of their investigation. So I don't
Yes.
know if their legal advisor gave them specific phone records as to what to and not to release. But when they said release anything relevant to the investigation, they should have been very clear
Yep.
and tell them that it all should have been a part of their investigation. Because you can't investigate a death and look at part of the records and think you're going to see the complete picture. Because if
And
she's
that's
giving you statements as to his mental state that can be verified, proven, or disproven via those phone records, then it's relevant. And you have to look through the full phone records to determine that. And if you needed some help, I would have looked through it with you and highlighted it for you if you needed some assistance. But to just choose to not look at it or to choose bits and pieces that you're going to make relevant is not going to work and will not work ever.
absolutely. So I do want to name this as an update for everyone. Where Chief Moya landed on that is the things that is asked for the supplemental police report. And so before I get into that, so also bring up the conversation related to the firearm, and then I'm going to update where we landed on all of this stuff because the firearm is related to the update I'm about to give. So go
Okay.
right ahead.
So we in our original meeting, we asked GPD, where are his firearms? We know that Tyrone carries multiple firearms and that he's licensed to carry and that he keeps them with him. So what is your knowledge as to where his firearms are? Deer in headlights. No one had no idea where these firearms were. No one could tell us anything about his firearms at that point. And then we get a police report where it's documented that Kiara said she was not able to find the firearms when looking through at the hotel. So here we are yet again. Where are his firearms? Um, our amazing private investigator, who, as I stated before, will be shared once this is finished because we are still anticipating him reviewing some documents. So we're not releasing his information yet, but it will be released. Reviewed the documents and was able to notify us that in the CAD call, it's discussed that the firearm was a firearm. Let me be specific because he does have more than one, but one particular firearm was located um, during his transport to the hospital, and the firearm is still where it was. And so at that point, which was after the point of case closure, GPD chose to go out and obtain this firearm. And my argument is if your case is closed and you have no suspicion of anything, why are you obtaining a firearm on a case that is closed? But neither here nor there, they did. And so even in the meeting with them yesterday, I'm asking, so where are these firearms now? Or this firearm now? Well, I got it. Mom tried to pick it up. I don't know if she got it. I'm not sure. Lucky for us, we had an individual in the room who didn't mind doing work. And she actually immediately did some research and was able to locate, oh, we still have the firearm in our possession. So we did ask, can they do some review of that firearm just to see if there's anything there. But we want to be mindful that you can't tell me you did a thorough investigation when a firearm was located in part of your investigation and you were not aware. You cannot tell me that you reviewed everything thoroughly when your CAD report that your department has access to that was written by communications for your agency documents this firearm, and it took us hiring a private outside individual for it to be located. You can't tell me you did your job, because everything about this shows that you failed to do your job. Because when you looked me in my face and you told me you didn't know where his firearms were, I assumed that as an officer, you had done everything possible to locate it and that it was not a part of your investigation. But the fact that it was and remained at this place for 4 months, because you didn't get it until months after the incident, and over a month after this case was closed, you cannot tell me that you did everything that you were supposed to do as part of your job when things like this occurred and were left unfounded and unreviewed.
And I want to name with the firearm because that more than one. That could have been one that he had on him because in the text message that we did receive, he did notify Kiara that there was one in the back seat on the floor of her vehicle.
When she
And
left.
so there is a theory, and not just a theory, but from professional people who looked at the actual evidence, who reviewed it and stated it is very possible that she could have hit him in the back of the head with a firearm. So even the fact that the other firearm is not recovered is also still very pertinent. But the fact that this did not happen. So where GPD did land, I'm with Chief Moya, and that he assured is the things specifically that were requested will actually be turned over. And so that's the fullness of the text messages and phone communications. That is the video from places like Papa John's, the one that they have recorded of the recording of the vehicle door opening. So literally things that Kiara's interview, that 4-hour interview, the body cam footage. So all the things, the supplemental report related to the firearm. He has assured that those things are doable and they should absolutely be turned over, and in weeks and not in months. So if they've not, where the redaction needs to take place, have been done, has agreed to actually get that done and get them over. So for us, it's still a long journey, but that is a win to now know we are actually going to get something that we are entitled to, that we've been waiting on for quite some time. And we were very honest. It's because we weren't a review. We know what was documented. We also understand there's been bias in what's documented. We also understand that what your officers documented contradicts itself. So we want to see for ourselves and lay our eyes on the actual interview with Kiara. We want to see what happened and what occurred in the body cam footage, of the people on the scene and with Kiara and those particular things and with statements and things that were actually taken. So wanted to make sure that we share, like, so there is a win. So that is a big update. And then, additional stuff will come once we get that and review it. We'll take the time to be very deliberate to share updates to let people know like what it is that we actually found. One thing that we drove home to, which is really, really, I think it was insulting of how we was gassed at the first meeting, that as we got additional information, the more information we got, the more it solidified that the family was not being emotional. They were definitely on the right path. They were asking the right questions, and the evidence pointed to something happened in that particular car more than anyone is willing to admit. And it points to, we can see two scenarios. There is something that could be accidental where things escalated. It could be, even if we go, so one of the things that I want to name is that in the statement that Natalie gave to them and that we also brought up, there was a previous email that I had sent even prior to doing the protest. And I shared it with the family. I want to start with two statutes that this seems to fall under, and they don't require intent. And so this was a big touch point for us because it was like, we don't think she intended to do anything. We're okay with that. What we're stating is the statutes that seem to fit in the elements, intent is actually not required. And so when I sent an email, I actually cited two statutes. One was manslaughter, which is Florida Statute 78 2.07, and the other was culpable negligence, which is 78 4.05. Even when Captain Hallett responded, she tried to state that these did not apply because she did not intend. We are very clear that intent, the statute is clear that intent was not required. But even from there, there was one statute that Natalie had brought to the table kind of early on, even before this one. And that one was leaving the scene of a crash resulting in death, which is Florida Statute 316.027. And with that one, a crash is actually not required. The fact that he, by Kiara's statement, jumped, whether it was his intent, whether he jumped out or not, out of a moving vehicle at 25 miles per hour, a crash does not require it to be a crash with another vehicle. And so with that statute, if we go by her statement, which is what GPD bent over backwards to go by, leaving the scene of a crash resulting in a death, absolutely wholeheartedly applies. It does not require intent as well. And so that is one of the things that we left them with. I also gave them the case of someone that I know who was trying to prevent from hitting a deer in her own neighborhood and was at dark. And what happened is her vehicle, she thought hit a tree, and so she had a new luxury car that caused law enforcement itself. So she was like, I'll just call my insurance company tomorrow. It's me and my property. Well, her vehicle called law enforcement. They charged her for leaving the scene of a crash, resulting in property damage for like $161 mailbox. In that case, her and then because she didn't realize she had hit the neighbor's mailbox, she paid the neighbor the next day. It was totally resolved. The neighbor fully understood. They prosecuted her to the fullest extent of the law about $161 mailbox with a neighbor who did not want things to go further. And so as we presented that on the table, when we were also clear, she absolutely left the scene. And they stated she went down to the store. Chief Moya asked, how far was that? And they was like, probably a quarter mile. My point was it was more than them 50 feet of this person that I know. So we know for a fact that it actually fits that. But some big news as it relates to that is Kiara herself filed a claim with the insurance company for a crash. So she filed a claim with the auto insurance company for a crash. So even as the person herself, she believes that it fits the statute because she filed an auto insurance claim. And so looking at that, the insurance company would utilize the same statutes as well, because even too, when they're deciding what they're going to do with a claim, looking at whether she was advised or somebody advised her, and GPD been over backwards to say that it does not apply, that absolutely brings home the point that we have absolutely been making. So even if you don't want to call it manslaughter, even if you don't want to call it culpable negligence, which it fits those and it fits the elements, it wholeheartedly fits leaving the scene of an accident, because by her statement, she had a responsibility to stop, render aid, and call for help. And by her statement, she left and went to the store and did not come back until she saw the ambulance. And so I wanted to make sure that I drove that home and was very clear before I turn it back over to Natalie. Some of the big takeaways is, one, we're going to finally get the rest of the stuff that we do. And I'm sure there's going to be so much more when we see on video for ourselves, because each time we've gotten things and saw it, there's always been so many major things that have come. I'm certain of it. And we were honest yesterday. By the way that the report is written up, you can tell that she was coached, and we believe that's going to be clear on record. That's one of the reasons that we want the video, but also body language, when they stated that the statement was consistent with a 4-hour interview. And we saw inconsistencies even what's written. That's a synopsis, those 23 pages. There's no telling what else was not deemed to be relevant that we will know. But then also this other really, really big, huge piece, that she herself filed an insurance claim regarding this actual quote unquote crash, which drives home the point that we all see. And everybody was floored to the point they were like, who filed it? In the room, like they had to get clarity because it blew their minds that she's the person that filed a claim.
Yes. So leaving yesterday's meeting was bittersweet. For me personally, it was bitter because no matter what we do here, Tyrone not coming back. Just 100% honest, with chills over my body right now. I'll never be able to sit my cousin down and tell him all the work that I've done, all the work that we've done, all the ways that we stood in unity as a family to show that he mattered. Um, it's happy. I'm happy to say that I can truly say that we did that in life. We stood together in life. We spent time together and we loved on each other. And I can say that he knew, he left here knowing that he was loved. But it would be nice for him to be able to tell me how he feels about everything that we've been doing. But with that being said, so the bitter part is that we can't have that conversation directly with him. But the sweet part is we were able to see a big shift in the room. The first meeting, we were there and we had the meeting and we knew what we knew, but GPD controlled the field at that point. We did not have the evidence. We did not have the information to kind of make a point one way or another. We had conversation, with them about what we anticipated, what we did know, but we did not have the documentation to support it. And like my mom says, documentation beats conversation every day. So we had the knowledge and the conversation, but we didn't have the documentation. But this meeting was a completely different situation because not only do we have the knowledge, but now we have the documentation to support it. And so when we're coming to the table now, we're not saying this is what we believe. We're saying this is what we know. This is how we know. And this is where you can go find the documentation that supports and improves it. And so leaving this meeting knowing that we were able to tell the individuals who are responsible for the individuals who failed him that your agency failed him and this is why they failed him and this is how they failed him and this is where you can go to see the failures. And we were able to leave them because we walked in the room with several copies of this document. And I've actually, the one thing I think is important to mention about this document that Mission A didn't state is that a part of this document, I actually asked that this particular document, and it states this letter is intended to preserve the record of the concerns regarding both the investigative process and the department's ongoing failure to timely fulfill its public records obligation. I reserve all rights available under Florida law and request that this correspondence be maintained as part of the official records related to this matter. I want this on the case. We want part of the actual case records to reflect that GPD has failed. And so when we are having these conversations in the future and we're talking about what those failures look like, I want to know what accountability looks like. I want to know how the individuals that chose to violate your policy as a government entity, a government agency, how they are held accountable for not doing the things that the tax dollars pay them to do, for not doing the things that your policy directs them to do, for not handling this case sufficiently, no matter who Tyrone was. Because it didn't matter if he was a bum under that bridge. It didn't matter if he was a judge who had just left the courtroom. He was a human being and he deserved to be treated appropriately. His case deserved to be investigated properly. And because they chose not to, we want them held accountable the same way we want the individual who's responsible for what happened held accountable.
Absolutely. The other part I do want to share is that with Chief Moya, he asked us to give us some time. We're not going to tell you that time frame. And again, we apologize for that. Helping to keep and minimize the chaos and the drama. It'll be the same thing after it happens and takes place. We will sit down and make sure that we update people. And in the time frame that he has, what he is doing is he's trying to think how to rectify this. So some things that he did name was being very open, because there is a private investigator that actually is trusted, that it may be presenting everything to them and then side by side with their team and then comparing and then seeing where the actual gaps are. It may be them footing the bill for somebody independent, and we'll see because there's a lack of trust that's actually there. And so to us, though, that is a big deal. And also to the city manager, it's a big deal for him to take the time to figure out how do we rectify this in the appropriate manner. Things that were made clear is that if you've done everything your due diligence and the evidence is not there, they will accept that with the aside if they not because the evidence is not there because you didn't collect it. You don't get a free pass if you don't have the ability to collect some evidence because you messed up. And so I think they're very, clear with that. They were very open, like transparent. And so putting that on record. So for us, even though it's still a part of the actual journey, we're still on the marathon. The big takeaways is now they have something to go look into because of this insurance claim that was filed by Kiara Davis. They have something to look into now as it relates to how can we proceed forward to actually appropriately investigate all the things that were not investigated, because there was so much that we were telling them. And even too, like I said, when they tried to dismiss the whole deal with the medical examiner, we was like, no, this is in writing in real time. This is not a miscommunication. And then also like this other puzzle piece of how we was dancing backwards and forth, and the family was about to have to get an attorney involved just to actually get the records to know that those things are coming, and wanting to drive this home because a lot of times the tax tactic is to wait people out. A lot of times it's to get you so overwhelmed that you actually give up. So to help people to understand that even when it's long and drawn out, you keep at it. If in your heart you know it's right, go figure out how to equip yourself with the information that you need in order to push them to do the right thing if they just don't do the right thing. When you love someone, or even if it's yourself, you or the people that you love deserve that. You deserve to turn over every stone in order to get the right thing to happen. And we want to make sure that that part is very, very clear. And that is the reason that we're taking the time to make sure that you have this update despite any of the chaotic things, because we do understand that there are people who really are vested. We understand there are people who really want to see actual justice and want to be a part, and and who've tried to give information in order to be helpful. And so that's why we're trying to balance those particular things to make sure that that happens, but also so that we're able to maintain and make the focus, because of a lot of the progress and the things that have been gathered in this process that people are actually unaware of.
Yes, and there are individuals who consistently reach out. I have certain individuals who consistently message me, text me, social media posts, and it's not a I just want to know what's going on. It's a true concern. It's a true how can I help? What can I do? What how can we make the difference? And the one thing that I've accepted is that we need systematic change. And I think I love the fact that Shanae multitasks very well in reference to this type of things, because a lot of times we get to a point where we're like, oh, what can we do? How can we affect change? We matter. Our voices matter, our votes matter, our statements matter, what we do matters. And a large part of the reason I chose the career path I chose is because I've seen individuals be failed by systems that are not designed to work for people that look like me and you. I've seen systems, and I'm not going to say that are broken. I'm going to say systems that are working the way that they're designed to work, because they're not broken systems. The systems were never designed to work for us. So they're working properly. They're working the way they were designed to work. It just never was designed to work for us. And the only way to fix those systems is to change the people who create the system or become a part of the system to impact the change within it. And so I chose to become a part of the system and create and impact change within it. And Shanae chose to influence individuals to work to vote people in who can make these changes. But as a community, we have to step up, because there shouldn't be a Tyrone Davis Jr. Justice for Dro movement, because GPD should have investigated this crime appropriately from day one. But because they chose not to, now it's time to hold them accountable. Now it's time to put people in position who's going to make the difference and understand we can't fix a system that's not broken. We have to change the system and make it work for everybody and not just people that don't look like us.
Absolutely. So I definitely appreciate everybody, who tuned in. Like I said, we want to be more deliberate. When that update comes sometime in the near future, we will do the exact same thing. Our deal is we're trying to find balance. We want to make sure y'all got what y'all need. We want to make sure that you all understand too, that you get to see that it's been a long journey. Like literally, it's been almost 8 months. And we're still at it, so that other people who know and they're trying to battle something within the system, that they don't give up. A lot of times things, weighing off is not the sensational thing. And so people don't realize just how long things actually take, and they don't actually happen overnight. And so even too, like Moya was like, you can go to FDLE and Inspector General and they'll kick it back, which we're aware of. And he was like, no, I want to figure out. So we want to give the opportunity to see if that particular thing happens. Also, there was a question that somebody asked earlier about if there was damage to Lulu's car. There
No.
was not, and the statute actually still does not require that. And so a lot of people are unaware of that particular thing. So when you go look at the statute, it was one of the reasons I didn't even want to start there when Natalie actually found it. But it is there. And two, we've had conversations outside of the private investigator, like with the neurosurgeon Nat Shands, with the FHP lieutenant who's been there for like 30 years, that's decorated. So, and one thing too, I want to make sure that drive home when the information has been given to people, it's not, well, what find you wrong, is look at this information. What do you gather from it? And what happened is everybody's gathered the same information or came to the same conclusion except for GPD. And so that's the reason that we understand and know this was never about a personal vendetta. This was never about this. It was about finding out the truth, getting to the bottom of what is actually right for this family, but then also for like his children. And that's another reason, like adults, need the opportunity to grieve and want those things, but we want to minimize the mess as it relates to his actual children. And so that's another reason that we're doing it in this particular way. And y'all know me, I listen, I'm petty with the best of them, but I want to do what we can as it relates to these children when other people want this to be so much more than what it is for other reasons. Anybody that knows me knows I'm here for the right reasons and what's right. And anybody that knows and has seen this family understands they are serious about getting justice for their loved one. I mean, that has been shown despite whatever pictures have tried to be painted. And so we want to keep it that way. So we appreciate you all. I just want to make sure if there are any other questions, but to make sure that I answered that one. I don't really think that there were any others. But if not, if you drop them in the comments and any of us see them, we'll try to make sure that we respond. And like I said, there will be an update in the near future once that next step actually happens. Well, there's a few next steps. So once we get the rest of the records and review those, will be an update. Once we meet again with Chief Moya, there'll be an update. So there's a few things that are actually coming down the pike in order to let you all know. So y'all enjoy y'all Tuesday. And Natalie, are there any closing words or things that you want to say to anybody?
Um, it's okay for it to be heavy. It's okay to step back. It's okay to breathe and regroup. It's not okay to let go. Not okay to give up. I've been a part of this process from day one, and it gets hard. There are points where I am drained. There are times where I literally am like, I don't know how much I could keep doing. And I step back and I love on my family and I spend time with the people that matter. And I have his kids with me and I feed off of the energy of the people that I love and I go right back at it because it's okay to be tired. It's not okay to stop. We had a family vacation and most of our family was able to leave the vacation and go home and get in their bed and get rest for work. And the rest of us, we got on the road and we drove those 3 hours there and 6 hours all the way home because this matters. He matters. His kids matter. And when we sit Chloe and Elijah down and we let them know this is the outcome of your dad's case, we're going to be able to tell them that we, as his family, everyone who was supporting him in this movement, I talked to his cousin on his mom's side this morning. So when I say family, I don't mean David's family. I mean Tyrone's family. We're going to be able to say that we did everything that needed to be done. And this is the outcome of your dad's case. No stone was left unturned. We got tired, but we may have bent, but we never broke. And that's what it looks like. That's what love looks like. That's what family looks like. That's what a fight looks like. Because if somebody would have told me when Shanae said in the beginning that this was a long process, that it was like this, I would be like, but I see now it really is a long process, but it's worth it. It's worth it every time I can go back to my family and say, this is the next update. This is where we are. This is what we have. This is what we're still doing. This is what we're still waiting for. And justice is coming. It's worth it. And so, hashtag justice for Dro, hashtag David Strong, blue hearts everywhere. Chloe and Elijah, we doing this for y'all. Tyrone Davis Jr., baby. As we left that meeting and we got under that underpass on Archer Road at I-75, and I looked over to where they covered over your name on the wall, it was all worth it. And it's going to all be worth it because it's for you. You deserve this because if it was any of us, you would do the same thing. And because of that, we will continue to fight for you until there is no fight left to do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. The only other thing I wanted to share as well is some names, if you see them in the comments, The Diverse and Broward TTEA have been very responsible and vivid faces of the vanished. And they are actually tagged in some of the comments in the post have been very responsible. So even in between, they may do, sometimes they do things where they lay it out. If you don't follow those pages, I do recommend that you follow them. Again, a matter of fact, let me show them because sometimes people are visual. So one of them is Broward T.
And just so y'all know, them is not our pages because everybody think
Yeah,
those pages belong to our family.
they're
They
not.
do not. We do not run those pages.
They do not. As a matter of fact, the person that runs Diverse actually reached out to me from her personal page.
Okay,
This is not the family at
like we
all.
don't run the
I've
page.
talked to some of them and know the actual work that they do. They've just lended their skill set in order to help and support. And so
Right,
people can help in different ways. And this is the way that they've chosen. And so I do want to share that. So in between time, I know that they do a lot of things. So they do post that you can actually go back through it to revise timelines, to do those particular things. And I know that's very helpful for people that really want to know. So that's the reason that I wanted to name before we got off. Those are 3 places that you can go and get resources. I know they are on Facebook. They may be on other platforms. When you go there, ask them. And so they have been very consistent. They've been very deliberate of getting the information out. Even too, sometimes they've reached out to make sure that the information is correct before actually getting it out. And that is super, super appreciated. And so I want to make sure that I lift that up because there is a huge value of social media influencers and what they can do in this case and so many others. And I don't want that value to be lost in the shuffle with any of the other stuff that's been sensationalized. So I wanted to make sure to lift them up. So I appreciate you all. And then Shakisha, it is good to see you all. Listen, everybody gonna see me under all kind of circumstances. Y'all know me. I'm gonna fight to the end. I hope y'all come with me. So y'all have a good night.
thank you.